What if everything we know about parenting, timeouts, consequences, sticker charts, was missing something ancient, something wise? In this audiobook-style summary of Hunt, Gather, Parent, we'll explore how the world's most peaceful, cooperative kids are raised, and how those same tools can transform your parenting today. As modern parents, we often find ourselves at a crossroads, armed with parenting apps, podcasts, schedules, and endless strategies, yet overwhelmed, exhausted, and sometimes even disheartened. We try so hard, charting behavior, reading the latest parenting books, managing every tantrum with a planned response. But what if, in trying to be the best, we've complicated what should be instinctive and human? Michaeleen Doucleff, a science journalist and a mother, shares her own moment of parenting burnout in the prologue, lying awake at 5 a.m., anxious and bracing for another battle with her strong-willed daughter, Rosie. She paints a picture many of us recognize. Loving our children deeply, but feeling lost, ineffective, and even afraid we're ruining our relationship with them. It's a moment of honest reckoning. And it becomes the launch point for a deeply human journey, one that asks a profound question: is there a better way to raise our kids, one that's been with us all along but somehow forgotten? To find answers, Doucleff doesn't turn to more experts or lab studies. Instead, she travels to some of the world's most enduring communities, the Maya in Mexico, the Hadzabe in Tanzania, and the Inuit in the Arctic, cultures that have been parenting successfully for thousands of years. Cultures where toddlers help without being asked. Where children cooperate without yelling. Where confidence and emotional intelligence are nurtured not by punishment or praise, but by quiet example and deep connection. Her premise is both radical and refreshingly grounded. What if the way forward in parenting isn't more, but less? What if ancient parenting holds the wisdom our modern lives are missing? Doucleff introduces us to her first transformative insight, that Western parenting is, in many ways, the weirdest in the world. Literally. She references the acronym WEIRD: Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Most psychological studies and parenting models are built on observations from these societies. Yet, globally, weird societies are the minority, only a small fraction of the human experience. In other words, most of what we think is normal parenting is actually quite rare. And this matters, because many of our modern parenting struggles are uniquely modern problems. We expect obedience but prize independence. We schedule every moment but long for creativity. We praise endlessly but still worry about our children's self-esteem. Doucleff reveals that in the village she visits, parenting looks wildly different, and profoundly effective. Children are calm, eager to help, and emotionally secure. And their parents? Less frazzled, more trusting, and far less likely to argue with their children. The contrast is striking. And for parents listening, it's a quiet invitation: what if it's not your child that's difficult? What if it's the parenting model that's broken? There's a moment she describes, watching a mother gently guide her child with minimal words, calm presence, and no raised voice. The child responds, not out of fear, but cooperation. That moment becomes a mirror, reflecting just how much noise we've added to parenting in the West. Control. Correction. Constant chatter. Instead of managing behavior, these ancient parenting cultures shape it. They model calm. They extend trust. They prioritize connection. And so begins Doucleff's transformation, and ours as well. She invites us not to throw away our values, but to rediscover what parenting can look like when it's rooted in timeless human wisdom. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's not about quick fixes. It's about deep relationships. And as we'll see in the chapters ahead, those small shifts, in how we respond, in how we lead, in how we let go, can ripple through our families in powerful, often feels instinctive. We follow routines passed down, or we pick up techniques from books and experts, hoping we're doing it right. But Chapter 2 of Hunt, Gather, Parent invites us to pause and ask, why do we parent the way we do? And what if the way we've learned it isn't actually natural? Michaeleen Doucleff starts this chapter by examining the roots of modern Western parenting. Much of it, she discovers, isn't based on experience or emotional wisdom, it's based on outdated research, clinical settings, and, surprisingly, even advice from men who weren't parents themselves. That's right, many early parenting experts were childless men working in controlled, sterile labs. And their conclusions still echo in parenting books and pediatric recommendations today. This realization hits hard, especially for mothers and fathers who've spent years feeling inadequate because their parenting doesn't align with these ideals. But here's the freeing truth. Those ideals were never rooted in the real-world messiness of family life. In contrast, Doucleff looks at traditional societies where parenting isn't a job to be learned, it's a natural human relationship. No one reads books. No one sets timers for tummy time. Yet, their children are emotionally secure, socially attuned, and deeply cooperative. One of the most striking differences she finds is that in these cultures, children are not seen as problems to solve or as wild beings needing taming. They are seen as capable, intelligent, and trustworthy from a very young age. This belief shifts everything. Instead of assuming a child will disobey, these parents assume the child wants to contribute. Instead of constant correction, there's observation, modeling, and quiet encouragement. And discipline? It's rarely dramatic. Often, a simple glance or a pause is enough, because the relationship is already so strong. Doucleff also explores how modern parenting is unusually isolated. In traditional communities, parenting is shared, not just between two parents, but among extended family, neighbors, older siblings, even other children. This parenting style eases the burden, offers perspective, and allows parenting to unfold with more patience and less pressure. But in the West, many of us are parenting in a vacuum. We're exhausted not because we're doing it wrong, but because we're doing it alone. There's also the issue of control. Western parenting often revolves around managing children, their behavior, their mood, their success. But the cultures Doucleff visits focus instead on relationship and trust. Children are free to explore, under gentle watch, and are trusted to make small decisions, to help, to grow into independence at their own pace. The result? Fewer power struggles. More cooperation. Less yelling. And children who feel deeply secure in themselves and their family. One thing becomes clear, many of the stressors we experience as modern parents are not inevitable. They're cultural. Learned. Reinforced. And they can be unlearned. This chapter isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because when we understand the roots of how we parent, we unlock the freedom to choose differently. Doucleff doesn't ask us to copy another culture. Instead, she invites us to borrow their mindset, to believe our children are capable, that we are enough, and that peace can come not from more effort, but from less interference. It's not about being perfect. It's about stepping back, and seeing our children, and ourselves, through a wiser lens. Imagine a home where your child doesn't need to be reminded, or bribed, to help. Where they naturally wipe the table, stir the pot, fold the clothes, or care for younger siblings, not because they were told to, but because they want to. For many modern parents, this sounds like a fantasy. But in Chapter 3 of Hunt, Gather, Parent, Michaeleen Doucleff discovers that for Maya families, it's simply normal. This chapter takes us deep into the Yucatan region of Mexico, where Doucleff and her daughter Rosie live with a Maya family. There, she witnesses something remarkable, children helping at every stage of the day, without nagging, without rewards, and without complaint. It's not magic. It's a completely different parenting philosophy, one that teaches cooperation as a natural part of life from the moment a child can walk. In Western homes, we often separate children from real work. We create child versions of chores, toys that mimic vacuums or kitchens, but rarely let our kids into the real, sometimes messy process of running a home. We assume they'll resist, complain, or do it wrong. So we do it ourselves. Then we resent them for not helping. But the Maya do the opposite. They assume the child wants to participate. That they can contribute. And instead of pushing help away because it's slower or imperfect, they welcome it, warmly and patiently. Doucleff tells the story of a toddler who spills beans while helping her mother in the kitchen. The mother doesn't scold. She simply sweeps the beans up with the child nearby, without frustration. That silent acceptance teaches the child, your effort matters. You're part of this. Over time, children internalize the value of contribution. Not from lectures, but from experience. There's also a shift in how tasks are introduced. Instead of chore charts or commands, Maya parents invite their children into tasks gently, often through modeling. A mother folds the laundry quietly, and the child watches. Soon, the child begins to copy. The parent doesn't praise, they nod, or smile. The action is its own reward. The child begins to see themselves as capable, as part of their own experience back home, where getting Rosie to help felt like a constant battle, met with whining or refusal. But in the Maya home, after just a few days of being surrounded by this quiet cooperation, Rosie begins to mimic it. She picks up a rag. Wipes a chair. Not because she's been told to, but because she feels included. That's the key, inclusion. Maya children aren't asked to help. They're invited into belonging. It's a small shift, but a profound one. Another difference? No power struggles. The Maya don't command or correct in the same way. Their tone is soft. Their gestures are slow. They observe before reacting. This calm energy creates an environment where a child doesn't need to resist, because they aren't being pushed. They're being trusted. So how can we bring this home? Doucleff offers a beautiful idea: teach by doing, include by default, and respond with patience. That means letting your child stir the pot, even if it spills. Letting them help fold clothes, even if it's crooked. Letting them sweep, even if they miss spots. Because the habit of helping isn't built through perfection. It's built through presence. We can start small. Invite your child to do one part of a task with you, not for praise, not for performance, but for connection. Smile. Don't correct. Let the moment feel calm. Over time, you're not just building a helper. You're shaping someone who sees themselves as part of something meaningful. By the end of chapter 3, what once felt impossible, a child who helps without being asked, now feels within reach. Not through control, but through trust. By the time most of us become parents, we've heard the advice 100 times: stay calm. Don't yell. Model emotional control. But when your toddler is melting down in public or your teen is slamming doors, staying calm can feel like a fantasy. We want peace, but too often we default to shouting, threats, or shutting down. In chapter 4 of Hunt, Gather, Parent, Michaeleen Doucleff travels to the Canadian Arctic to live with Inuit families, and what she witnesses is nothing short of astonishing. Children who rarely tantrum. Parents who never yell. Homes that hum with emotional steadiness. She begins with a question that echoes in every modern household: how do these parents raise such calm, cooperative kids, without punishment or power struggles? The answer lies in how Inuit parents teach emotional regulation. First, Doucleff notices what's missing. There's no scolding, no lectures, and definitely no yelling. If a child acts out, even aggressively, the adult doesn't explode. Instead, they pause. They observe. They respond with an almost serene stillness. One Inuit mother explains it this way: if I yell, the child learns to yell. It's simple, but profound. Emotional responses are modeled, not taught by instruction, but absorbed by imitation. And this calmness isn't passive. Doucleff shares a story of a child who hits his mother. In a typical Western setting, this might spark immediate punishment or anger. But the Inuit mother simply turns away, offering no attention or emotional fuel. Later, once calm has returned, she gently reenacts the situation using storytelling and play. This is a key insight of Chapter 4. Inuit parents don't punish bad behavior, they teach through storytelling, role-play, and quiet reflection. If a child is rough, the parent might say, "Let's pretend I hit you. How does that feel?" Or they tell a traditional tale that illustrates the consequences of anger or cruelty. This technique helps children see behavior through another person's eyes, not just as a rule broken, but as a relationship affected. And remarkably, it works. Children internalize calmness, empathy, and emotional control, not through consequences, but through connection. Another major difference. Inuit parents don't interpret misbehavior as disrespect. They see it as immaturity, overstimulation, or a temporary emotional state. So instead of reacting with offense, they respond with patience. Imagine what would change in our homes if we saw a tantrum not as defiance, but as a skill gap. A child not trying to upset us, but struggling to self-soothe. And we met that moment, not with discipline, but with deep calm. Doucleff herself puts this into practice with her daughter Rosie. At first, she struggles. Staying calm in the face of a meltdown goes against every instinct. But when she pauses, really pauses, and uses a gentle tone instead of anger, she sees a shift. The meltdown slows. The atmosphere softens. Rosie becomes more receptive. What begins as a strategy becomes a habit. By modeling calmness, again and again, Doucleff learns that she is not only changing Rosie's behavior. She is changing her own nervous system. That's another quiet truth from this chapter: when we regulate ourselves, we teach our children to do the same. Not by words, but by presence. Not by consequences, but by co-regulation. In Inuit culture, parenting is a long game. It's not about controlling behavior in the moment. It's about shaping a child's inner compass, their emotional toolkit, for the future. So what can we do, starting today? Speak softly, even when the situation feels loud. Use storytelling to reflect behavior, instead of scolding. Pause before reacting, and model the calm we hope to see. Trust that growth doesn't come through punishment, but through understanding. The lesson is clear: raising emotionally intelligent kids starts with becoming emotionally steady ourselves. And that steadiness is not something we have to be born with, it's something we can build, one calm breath at a time. By the time we reach Chapter 5, something in the reader, and in Doucleff herself, has shifted. We've heard about cooperation from the Maya, calmness from the Inuit, and now, in the sun-washed landscapes of Tanzania, we're about to discover something else our modern parenting often stifles: true childhood independence and joy. The Hadzabe people live a radically different life from most of us: no schools, no alarm clocks, no screens, no strollers. But within this difference lies a parenting insight that is deeply relevant to today's overwhelmed, over-involved moms and dads. The best way to raise capable, resilient kids is to trust them with freedom. When Doucleff arrives, she observes a striking scene. Children, some as young as 2 or 3, walk confidently across rocky terrain, climb trees, explore the bush, and make their own choices. No one hovers. No one nags. And no one seems afraid. At first, she feels shocked. Where are the adults, she wonders. Why aren't they supervising every move? But over time, it becomes clear: these children are competent because they've been treated as competent since birth. This is the key to the Hadzabe parenting philosophy. Children are not fragile. They're not helpless. They are learning beings, wired to grow and adapt, but only when given the chance. And it's not just about physical freedom. It's about emotional and decision-making freedom too. Hadzabe kids are rarely told what to do. Instead, they're allowed to make choices, sometimes even risky ones. They play with sharp tools. They explore far from home. And yes, they make mistakes. But every mistake is seen as an opportunity to grow, not a threat to control. Doucleff reflects on how different this is from her own parenting style. Back home, she micromanages every detail, what Rosie eats, wears, says, and touches. It comes from love, of course, but also fear. Fear that if she loosens control, chaos will follow. But watching the Hadzabe, she begins to see that control doesn't create safety, confidence does. And confidence is built through experience, not protection. There's another surprising insight here: Hadzabe children rarely fight or bicker. Without constant adult direction or forced sharing, they learn to work things out on their own. Doucleff notes how the older kids naturally look after the younger ones, not because they're told to, but because the culture expects it. There's a sense of community responsibility that's hard to imagine in many Western homes. She tries something different. Instead of managing Rosie's every move, she starts saying yes more. Yes to exploring. Yes to climbing. Yes to trying. And slowly, she sees something beautiful emerge. Rosie becomes more capable, more joyful, more sure of herself. The fear, it turns out, wasn't just in Rosie. It was in Doucleff. And by letting go, not all at once, but little by little, she creates space for Rosie to grow into herself. That's the gift of Chapter 5, a new understanding that our job as parents isn't to prevent every fall. It's to help our children become people who can rise on their own. It's easy to believe that good parenting means constant guidance. But the Hadzabe show us that sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is step back, say less, and trust more. When we allow our children the space to experience, explore, and make their own decisions, we're not being negligent, we're being brave. We're saying, I believe in you. And when they feel that belief, they begin to believe in themselves. After months immersed in the homes and hearts of the Maya, the Inuit, and the Hadzabe, Michaeleen Doucleff returns home changed. But like many of us who've read a great book or had a life-altering insight while traveling, she faces the hardest part of all, bringing the wisdom home. Because it's one thing to observe calm parenting in the Arctic or joyful cooperation in the Yucatan, it's another to translate that into your modern kitchen, surrounded by laundry, emails, and an overtired preschooler refusing to eat dinner. But that's where Chapter 6 shines. It's about integration. How do you take ancient parenting principles and apply them in the chaos of daily life? Doucleff doesn't pretend it's easy. She admits to falling back into old habits, snapping at Rosie, bribing her to get into her car seat, correcting every behavior. But what's different now is her awareness. She knows what's possible. She's seen it. So she begins small. She starts by creating space, literal and emotional, for cooperation. Instead of giving instructions, she invites. Instead of managing, she includes. If Rosie is nearby while Doucleff is folding laundry, she lets her help. Not with big praise or sticker charts, but with a simple smile. She resists the urge to fix Rosie's messy folds, and something shifts. Rosie keeps helping. Next, Doucleff works on her tone and presence, inspired by the Inuit mothers. When Rosie melts down, instead of yelling, she sits nearby. Quiet. Calm. Not reacting, just holding space. Sometimes she role-plays the behavior later, using storytelling to teach, rather than discipline. It feels awkward at first. But over time, it becomes easier, and more effective. The power struggles start to freedom, like the Hadzabe children had. She lets her climb, explore, even make mistakes. At first, she hovers. But gradually, she learns to trust. And with that trust comes something unexpected. Rosie becomes more confident, less clingy, and far more capable. These shifts are subtle, but they accumulate. Slowly, their home becomes quieter. Calmer. More connected. And perhaps the most transformative insight of all is this: you don't need a perfect routine or a strict method to raise a good kid. You just need presence, trust, and patience. Doucleff realizes that modern parenting overloads us with strategies and fixes. But what really changes a child, and a parent, is something older and deeper. Let them help. Show them calm. Trust their competence. Be the example, not the enforcer. She begins to see parenting less as a daily battle and more as a relationship to be nurtured, moment by moment, with fewer words, less control, and more quiet faith in the process. And Rosie? She thrives. Not because everything is perfect, but because the energy in the home has shifted. It's no longer about correcting. It's about connecting. By the end of this chapter, Doucleff isn't offering a parenting formula. She's offering a new posture, one rooted in simplicity, respect, and shared humanity. A way to raise strong, kind, emotionally healthy children without losing your mind or your joy. Because maybe the real secret isn't out there. Maybe it's in going back to what's always worked, long before books, experts, and apps, when parenting was something we did with community, calm, and confidence. By the end of her journey, across the Maya villages of Mexico, the frozen silence of the Arctic, and the sun-soaked savannas of Tanzania, Michaeleen Doucleff isn't the same parent. She hasn't just collected insights. She's undergone a quiet transformation. One that's less about fixing her child, and more about remembering what it means to raise one. This final chapter is less of a summary, and more of a soft landing, a place to reflect on what we've learned, and how we move forward. And it begins with a powerful realization, not because we're doing it wrong, but because we're doing it alone, and we're doing too much. We micromanage. We over-explain. We hover, correct, overthink. All with love, of course, but sometimes at the cost of connection, confidence, and peace. The cultures Doucleff visited aren't magical or perfect. But they offer a radically different perspective. Parenting is not about control, it's about collaboration. Not about constant correction, but about modeling and trust. She leaves us with these quiet truths. Children are wired to help, to learn, and to belong. We just need to stop getting in the way. We don't need to talk so much. Children learn more from our presence than our lectures. Cooperation doesn't come from coercion. It comes from being included, respected, and trusted. Emotional strength isn't taught through consequences. It's developed in the presence of calm, patient adults who model emotional steadiness. Freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. When we let go a little, our children rise to meet us. But perhaps the most important message is this: you don't need to travel the world to change your parenting. You don't need to throw out everything you know. You just need to begin remembering what you already carry, the ancient wisdom in your bones, your instincts, your culture, your lineage. You need to slow down. Speak less. Trust more. And see your child, not as a project to be managed, but as a human being learning how to live, by watching you. Doucleff closes by reminding us that parenting isn't a science experiment or a checklist. It's a relationship. A dance. A quiet, beautiful co-creation between adult and child. It's messy. Imperfect. Sometimes loud. But it can also be simple, grounded, and full of deep joy, if we let it be. So if you take one thing from this journey, let it be this. You already have what you need. Your child does, too. All that's left, is to trust it. If this summary gave you a fresh perspective on parenting, imagine what just one small change could do in your home this week. If you found this helpful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another parent who might need some encouragement today. Don't forget, this is just a summary. I highly recommend reading the full Hunt, Gather, Parent to experience Michaeleen Doucleff's full journey and wisdom. And I'd love to hear from you. What parenting moment from this summary spoke to you the most? Drop it in the comments below. I read every one. Until next time. Keep parenting with presence, not perfection.